Sixth grade, welcome to history class. We are cruising through chapter 19, medieval Europe, learning about a lot of things that are happening in the continent of Europe. Today we're going to take on the kingdoms and the Crusades, an interesting time in history. The overall essential question is, how do governments change? We're going to see something that totally changed the course of history happen today and has a major impact on us today. As it says, it matters because the development of law and government during the Middle Ages in Europe still affects us today. So there was a major change that happened a little over 800 years ago. Because of that change, we play a role with it today. Okay, you got your notes sitting here on your screen, and then maybe your worksheet that's underneath it, trying to multitask as you work your way through the matching and the multiple choice. Let's get rolling. In the late 800s, Vikings from Scandinavia attacked Britain, where the Anglo-Saxons had founded many small kingdoms. King Alfred of Wessex, number one, later known as Alfred the Great, united the Anglo-Saxons and halted the Viking advance. The kingdom that Alfred united became known as Angleland. And that was too much to pronounce, so we just called it England. Alfred ruled England from 871 to 899. Unfortunately for England, the Anglo-Saxon kings who followed Alfred were weak rulers, and then, of course, hint, hint, you fall back into chaos. In 1066, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England died without an heir. A noble named Harold Godwinson claimed the English throne. So you have number 2 in your notes here with this Anglo-Saxon king dying. I have to sneeze. Oh man, that hurt. I apologize. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so we die without an heir. So then this guy says, I should be king. In France, a relative of the Anglo-Saxon kings, William, who was Duke of Normandy, said that he, not Harold, was the rightful king of England. So you can see, guys, when there's not a son to take the throne, then we got these cousins or these relatives. I don't know exactly how they think they're related, but no, I should be king. No, I should be king. So in the fall of 1066, William and his army of Norman knights landed in England. They defeated Harold and his foot soldiers at the Battle of Hastings. William was crowned King of England and became known as William the Conqueror. Number 3 in your notes. You should just start to learn some things, guys. So we have not talked about too many actual battles before, but you should. Some of these things are famous in history. 800, Charlemagne comes in. 1066, William the Conqueror defeats Harold at the Battle of Hastings. We had the Battle of Tours we talked about when Charles Martel stopped the Muslim invasion. Those are just famous dates and a major impact in history. Okay, we know a lot about this battle, guys. You could watch videos on the Battle of Hastings. They know exactly when it started, things like that, because of the different things that were happening, that were going on. Cruising on. At first, the Anglo-Saxons resisted William's rule. To stop the Anglo-Saxon revolts, William seized land of Anglo-Saxon nobles and divided among his Norman knights. I love it. Number 4 in your notes. All right, you guys are going to cause problems? Forget it. I'm going to take your land away from you and give it to people who fought for me. William wanted to learn as much as possible about his new kingdom. To decide taxes, he carried out the first census since Roman times. Every person and farm animal in England was counted and recorded in the Domesday Book. I think it was chapter 1 where we got the Domesday Book mentioned. We're back to it, guys. So he's trying to be fair. So you wrote down number 4 where he took his land and away from them and gave it to his knights. And you wrote down number 5. And here I'm like, wow, you're kind of mean. And here I'm like, wait, you're trying to be fair and learn things in your Domesday books. Now, cruising on. The Normans who ruled England kept many Anglo-Saxon laws and practices. However, they also brought many customs from mainland Europe. Under William's rule, officials and nobles in England spoke French, which was the language of Normandy. They built castles, cathedrals, and monasteries in the Norman style. Anglo-Saxons learned new skills from Norman weavers and artisans, yet they still spoke their own Anglo-Saxon language, which would later become English. As more and more Normans and Anglo-Saxons married, their customs merged into New English culture. So we have this New English culture, guys, number 6 in your notes, that just slowly develops over time as they intermarry and blend their customs together. All right, you saw that this was the language of Normandy, guys. Last week we were talking about D-Day, the wonderful battle in World War II decided by the tides. That happened in Normandy. So right on the top of your notes for extra credit, Normandy equals D-Day. And now you know where the D-Day battle was fought. It's where William the Conqueror came out of almost, 900 years before that. Henry II. After the death of William, English kings further strengthened their power. From 1154 to 1189, Henry II ruled England as well as most of Wales and Ireland. Number 7 in your notes. He was also a feudal lord in France and in Scotland. Some of the French lands belonged to his wife, whose name was Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. So you can see how nobles marry nobles, guys. Kings marry queens from other lands, and then that's how they make their kingdoms bigger. Henry set up a central court with lawyers and judges. Circuit judges traveled across the country to hear cases, brought the king's laws to all parts of England. Number 8 in your notes. You can see the traveling judges is important. Think about King David back in the day when his son Absalom tried to lead a revolt. Hey, you have a case, but you have to come all the way to the king to try to hear it. Man, he would have said, we should just set up people that travel around for you. Henry also set up juries of citizens to settle disputes. Traveling circuit judges met with a grand jury. Grand juries decide if people should be accused of a crime. If they can, then comes a trial jury. The trial jury decides whether a person is innocent or guilty. Okay, guys, you got to understand the difference between this. So what this happens is I present my evidence to a grand jury, and the grand jury will say, I think there's enough evidence here to have a case. I'm not deciding if that case is guilty or innocent. I'm just telling you, I think you have enough evidence. So a grand jury can throw a case out, guys, and not even let it go to trial because there's not enough evidence to be able to support it. So we're not going to waste the time on a trial jury because there's just lacking so much evidence. So if I'm a lawyer and I want to charge you with a crime, step 1, I have to convince a grand jury that I have enough evidence. If they say good, then I work on my trial, and then later we'll go to that. So make sure you know the difference. Grand jury, is there evidence? Trial jury, are you guilty? Henry's son John became king of England in 1199. King John increased taxes in England and punished his enemies without trials. English nobles rebelled against the king. So if you ask me, went a little too far and started to anger some people. Okay, you're cruising along, and I think you got 9, 10, and 11 in your notes done. In 1215, the nobles met with King John at Runnymede, a nearby meadow. There they forced John to seal on a document called the Magna Carta, which means the Great Charter. That should probably be number 12 in your notes. You can either write down the word document, or if you want to give it its name, it's the Magna Carta. Either one would work here. What does it do? The Magna Carta placed limits on the king's power. You can't do these things. You can't increase taxes and put us on trial punish us without trial. The king could collect taxes only if the group of nobles called the Great Council agreed. So we're holding the power back. And what these nobles did is they said, King John, if you want to keep that title of king, you better have our support. If not, we're going to rebel against you. And so he signs it. The Magna Carta also forced the king to uphold the rights of freemen, including the right of fair trials by jury. From the Magna Carta, no free man shall be taken in prison, seized, outlawed, banished, or in any way destroyed, nor will we proceed against or prosecute him except by the lawful judgment of his peers and by the law of the land. So you have a fair trial by your peers. In other words, guys, when we talk about these juries are not lawyers, juries are not judges, juries are 12 ordinary people in America that we select. They hear a case, they make a decision. The Magna Carta relied on the feudal idea that the king and his noble vassals both had certain rights and duties. Over time, however, the Magna Carta helped strengthen the idea that all people, regardless of rank, have rights, and that the power of the government should be limited. Welcome to America. King Edward I, King of England in the late 1200s, increased the authority of his council. This group of lords, church leaders, knights, and townspeople became known as Parliament. Parliament came to be divided into two groups, the upper house and the lower house. The growth of Parliament marked an important step toward representative government. Two houses kind of sounds like our House of Representatives and our Senate, guys, making up our Congress. So you can see how much America learned from 800 years ago and the Magna Carta, which did all these things. Okay, you're through number 14 in your notes. That's what's happening in England. Now let's see what's happening in France. Rewind in time. In 843, Charlemagne's empire was split into three parts. The western part became the Kingdom of France. In 987, the West Frankish nobles made Hugh Capet their king. Hugh began the Capetian dynasty of French kings. Capetian kings controlled only the area around Paris, which was the capital. Many French nobles had more power than the kings did. This began to change when Philip II became King of France in 1180. So you're through number 15 in your notes. Philip worked to expand the French monarchy's wealth and power. At the beginning of Philip's reign, the King of England ruled feudal lands in western France. Philip fought the wars against the English and gained some of these territories. So what happens, guys, is you can see how this cruises through there. And a lot of people say, we're across the water here. You stay over here, we'll try to rule over there. But there was definitely some overlap, guys, and King Philip is going to fight to try to get that back. Philip IV wanted to raise taxes to pay for his wars. In 1302, he gained approval for this plan from representatives of the three estates. We would call them social classes. In France, they're just called the estates. No big deal. Of the French society. The first estate was the clergy or the priests. Nobles made up the second estate, and townspeople and peasants made up the third estate. This meeting began the Estate General, France's first parliament. The Estate General never became as powerful as a parliament in England. So they're trying to copy and get these representatives, but it's just not the same thing, guys. We'll go back and we're going to talk about these three estates later on in the book when we talk about the French Revolution and why that happened. So, first part of today's lesson up here, second part of today's lesson in here. Now, third part, we're going to bounce over here when we talk about the Slavs. You're at number 17 into your notes there. Cruising on. In Eastern Europe, people called the Slavs established villages and towns along the rivers in that region. The Slavs consisted of three important groups, Southern, Western, and Eastern. In the 800s, the Eastern Slavs began to expand in the city of Kiev. The medieval state of Kievan Rus grew wealthy from its river trade with Scandinavian and Byzantine Empire. So you can see the Kievan Rus up here, guys, cruising on these rivers, and can go down here to the Byzantine Empire and up here into Scandinavia. In 988, the Rus ruler Vladimir married the sister of a Byzantine emperor. Brilliant, right? So I'm this guy, I'm ruling this. I'm going to marry the sister who's in charge of all that. Woo! Vladimir became an Eastern Orthodox Christian. Soon, priests from Constantinople came to teach the people of Kievan Rus religious rituals and the art of painting icons. Whoa! Back from the blast from the past when we talked about the icons, probably in like chapter 12. In 1240, we're going to get a rewind from the last few chapters. The Mongol warriors of Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan from Central Asia conquered the Kievan Rus. The Slavic city of Novgorod was the only major city to be spared attack by the Mongols. However, Novgorod's rulers had to pay tribute to the Khan, the Mongol leader, and accept Mongol as their rulers. All right, so you're number 22 in your notes. Although the Mongols spared Novgorod, the city faced attacks from the west by Germans and the Swedes. In 1240, Novgorod forces led by a prince named Alexander Nevsky defeated these invaders. Okay, that was number 22 in your notes. During the period of Mongol rule, many Slavs moved north from Kiev and built settlements in an area which is now Russia. That would be this over here, guys. One settlement was Moscow. Today that's the capital of Russia. Moscow became a large city that prospered because it was at the crossroads of several major trade routes. 23 in your notes. The rulers of Moscow learned to cooperate with the Mongols. In return, the Mongols gave them rights to collect taxes from other Slav territories. If a territory could not provide soldiers or tax money, Moscow rulers took control of it. In this way, Moscow was able to gradually expand its territory. So Moscow just works with the Mongols. We'll police this for you. And the Mongols say, great, make sure they're making their payments, and if they don't, you can have their land, because we know you make your payments. And so it worked out really well. Let's learn who one of them is. Ivan III. Ivan III became the ruler of Moscow in 1462. He married Sophia, a niece of the Byzantine Empire. Well, he definitely learned his history, didn't he? Marry into the power. Ivan adopted the lavish style of Byzantine rulers and was referred to as a Tsar. The Russian word Tsar, like Caesar in Latin, means emperor. Sometimes, guys, you'll see it spelled with a C. I've seen it spelled T-S-A-R. Either one, Tsar. In 1480, Ivan III had finally driven the Mongols from Moscow and Russian territory. He turned next to the north and west to add territory. By then, the people of Moscow, which were now known as Russians, had made great strides toward establishing a huge empire. Today, guys, Russia, by far the largest empire in the world as we do these things. So this map kind of really misshapes it because we're talking up here near the North Pole. Here's a little picture of Ivan III. And here's probably a better example of yellow Russia here and everything that's happening. Okay, now let's talk about the last thing that we were going to do in our notes today, the Crusades. You got through number 25 in your notes. During the 1000s, the Byzantine empires in the east came under attack. In 1071, an army of Muslim Turks defeated the Byzantines and seized control of most of the Byzantine lands of Asia Minor. You see Asia Minor on your map here. Today, that's the country of Turkey. The Byzantine emperor asked Pope Urban II for military aid to save his Christian empire from Muslim forces. The Pope agreed to help the Byzantines. He hoped that, in return, the Eastern Orthodox Church would again unite with the Roman Catholic Church and accept him as its religious leader. So, guys, if you remember, like 8 chapters ago when we talked about Rome dividing and we had the Great Schism, which was the split between the East and the West, and how East became Eastern Orthodox and the West became Roman Catholics. So these guys are under attack. The leader here says, hey, Pope, will you get some guys together and come fight for us? So the Catholic Pope's going to say, you bet. He's going to get some soldiers. He's going to come down. He's hopefully going to win. And he's going to say, hey, remember how I helped you out? Why don't you make me the overall super Pope and establish me as the #1 guy? That's the land. That's how it's playing out. In 1095, the Pope asked Europe's nobles to begin a crusade. What is a crusade? A crusade is a holy war against the Muslim Turks. He urged them to capture Jerusalem and free the Holy Land where Jesus has lived from the Muslims. So, guys, this is a religious war. And what he says, guys, the Muslims took this land. They're like Samaritans. I don't know. They're like the Romans. They're like the Gentiles. Come on, Christians. We got to fight and get the land back to Christianity. This is where Jesus lived. We should free it from the Muslims because, guys, Christians don't believe that Muslims believe the right faith. So we got to take it back from the unbelievers. And he inspired thousands of European soldiers on horseback and on foot, headed east on the First Crusade. When was the First Crusade? 1095, when Urban II, the Pope, launches it. Important thing in history. They reached Jerusalem in 1099. In a fierce battle with the Muslims, they stormed the city. You're cruising along, you're down to like number 29. The Crusaders conquered several regions. They set up 4 states controlled by Europe. The Kingdom of Jerusalem in the Holy Land, Edessa and Antioch in Asia Minor, and Tripoli, which is in now Lebanon. These states were surrounded by Muslim territory, so they depended on supplies from the Italian cities of Genoa, Pisa, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and Venice. So we have to ship them in, guys. So we have little cities, but everything around this is still Muslim land. So Christian land, yellow. Muslim land, remember when we talked about that in green? All that stuff happening. Love it. So you got this little yellow from the Crusades, guys. After Muslim forces retook Edessa, the Second Crusade began. So, First Crusade, I would say the Crusaders won. They got this. And then they lost it. So, we lost it. Send the second. This time the Muslims defeated them. So in 1174, led by a brilliant general named Saladin, the Muslims retook Jerusalem. So they took Jerusalem, guys. They held it for about 80 years and then lost it. This action triggered the Third Crusade, which was also a failure. Throughout the 1200s, Europeans continued to organize crusades. They made few gains. By the end of the century, the Muslims had gained all the land conquered. So guys, 1 crusade, 2 crusade, 3 crusade, I think there was a total of 5 crusades. In the end, they lost all the land anyways. So we might say, not really worth it. Picked a fight, motivated by religion, ended in disaster. The Crusades brought Western Europeans into contact with Byzantines and Muslims. As a result, Western Europeans gained new knowledge. In architecture, they learned how to build domes and create mosaics. They discovered how to build better ships and make more accurate maps. They also learned how to use a compass to tell direction. Wealthy people in Western Europe began to demand Eastern goods such as spices, sugar, lemons, and silk. Sounds great. We came in contact, we learned new skills in architecture, we learned new skills in shipbuilding, making maps, we got products. It sounds like the effects of the Crusades were positive. The Crusades, however, weakened feudalism. Nobles who joined the Crusades sold their lands, freed their serfs, lost their power. The kings built a stronger central government. So kings gain power, nobles lose their power. The Crusade lasted over a period of more than 200 years, and it caused bitter feelings between Christian Western Europe and the Islamic world. So guys, without saying it bluntly, we have huge hatred, and I suppose we could maybe use the word racism here. We'll at least use the word discrimination. In other words, I say, hey, Christian, you need to go to fight these Muslims. Okay, you instantly have a bad feeling toward them because you have to go to war against them, right? And so we create this animosity and hatred toward a group because they took those things. In the end, guys, I was living over here and I just traveled hundreds of miles over here to fight a war. A lot of people say just mind your own business. But you think about all the wars America's involved in. So many times we go over and we fight wars, and sometimes the complaint is, what are you doing fighting around the world? It's not our problem. Well, we want the land where Jesus lived to go back to Christians. So they would say, yes, it is our problem, but you do that what you want. Okay? In the end, have some ill feelings that have lasted a lifetime. Still happens today, guys. Today, in reality, Muslim extremists hate Christians, and Christian extremists hate Muslims, and we can date it back almost 1,000 years of having it happen that way. All right, the Crusades. Blessings on your day. If I was working my worksheet after I got all these notes filled in, on the bottom, I personally would not use the letter C. And I personally would use the letter D the most. Have a good one.